Hi guys, I'm just another guy named James, and today I'm going to be talking about the very first story of the 1987 Flash comic series. Now, this comic series is interesting. It was the first Flash #1 that had been published since the 40s with Flash Comics #1 by DC, and this was also kind of the post-crisis retelling of the Flash's character. Now, one of the significant things that happens to the Flash in Crisis on Infinite Earths is he actually dies. So this is not the typical Flash. This is not Barry Allen. This is Wally West. Now, typically Wally West is one of my all-time favorite characters. I grew up watching the Justice League show from the early 2000s. Wally West was a great character on that. In Young Justice, he's one of the most interesting characters. In Teen Titans, the episode where he's Kid Flash is an all-time great. When I was growing up, Wally West was the Flash. And that all kind of changed in my lifetime in 2014 when the CW show aired, and then all of a sudden Barry Allen was the Flash of the pop culture again, which I always thought was a bit odd. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about Flash, the first story of the Flash series. Now, this story is written by Mike Baron and drawn by Jackson Guice, and it's an interesting one, I guess. Let's go for the recap before I start to explain why I'm saying it's interesting instead of good. But let's roll. I think we can roll straight in. Like I said, written by Mike Baron, drawn by Jackson Guice. All right, let's roll. Our story today opens on Wally West, who's in a gas station buying some lottery tickets and candy bars, before walking into his apartment, where the Teen Titans and Wally's girlfriend, Francine, are throwing him a surprise party, because it's Wally's 20th birthday. But the party is interrupted when a hospital calls Wally because they need to have a heart delivered from New York to Seattle for a transplant. And there's a big old snowstorm over Wyoming and Idaho. And the Flash says he'll do it, but he wants compensation. He wants health insurance. So the doctors, after being a little horrified that he's, asking for favors, agree. And Flash runs off with the heart. As Wally runs, he thinks about Barry Allen, the previous Flash, who was Wally's uncle by marriage and his mentor. And Wally also remembers how Barry died saving the world in Crisis on Infinite Earths, leaving Wally with the legacy of the Flash. And as Flash runs, he runs past a man who's being strangled. So he turns around to help, but by the time he makes it back, the attacker is nowhere to be found. So Flash attends to the victim, who is a private investigator who is on the trail of Vandal Savage, who comes out of the woods to try to kill Flash and finish off the PI, although the PI is already pretty close to dying. But Flash starts to fight Savage, but he remembers that he has the heart in his backpack. So, since the PI was already dying and already dead, Flash decides to just run into town, tell the cops to go investigate, and then leave. And for the rest of Wally's run to Seattle, he can't stop thinking about Vandal Savage. And eventually, Flash reaches the hospital where the patient is, and once he gives the heart to the nurses, he passes out. When the Flash wakes up, a nurse tells him that the heart patient wanted to meet him. So Wally goes to her room, and she asks to see his costume. So Wally puts it on for her, and he asks if she's ever heard anything of Vandal Savage. He thinks to ask because she's something of an eclectic historian. And she explains that Savage is basically like a boogeyman of history, bearing some sort of magical powers. After this quick conversation, Flash hops a flight back to New York, where he stops the plane from being hijacked, and in the process, he hurts his wrist. When Wally gets back to his apartment, he turns on the news and sees that he won the lottery. But his excitement fades when he notices a gift on his kitchen table, which he assumes is from his girlfriend. So Wally goes over to open it, And when he does, he finds a human heart just sitting in the box. Wally then pops his costume out of his ring, and Vandal Savage comes turns a light on in the corner, and he's there to fight the Flash. As Flash puts on his costume, he questions Savage as to why he's coming after Wally, to which Savage responds that the Flash is his greatest enemy, even if the man under the mask has changed. When Wally finishes putting on his threads, he tries to run out of the apartment, but Savage has somehow transported a hellish landscape to appear right outside the door. So Flash and Savage just have to start fighting, but the fight doesn't last very long before Flash is able to judo throw Savage into the hellscape, which causes the whole thing to disappear. Wally then meets up with his girlfriend, and the two decide that Francine is going to pick up the lotto earnings, while Wally investigates Savage because he doesn't believe that Savage died or was slowed down in any way after their fight. The next day, Wally follows the one lead that he was able to find to an antique shop which is owned by Vandal Savage, but it's already been closed. So Wally puts it to the back of his mind, and he takes Francine to some fancy shindig. But after dancing the night away at the party, someone sends the pair a bottle of champagne, and it's none other than Vandal Savage. So Wally makes eye contact with Savage, and Savage starts beating people up. He even throws a woman out of the building. So Wally has to run out and suit up so that he can save her. But when Flash tries to get back into the building, he finds that it's been sealed by a spell of containment, so he has to find another way in. Inside the building, Francine, who has some sort of ability to control metal, is trying to fight Savage, but it isn't going very well for her. So Flash hops in and starts fighting Savage, but before once again tossing him out of the building, just like earlier, Savage disappears before he can hit the ground. And honestly, that's about where our story ends. There's a little bit more where like Wally buys like an apartment or like a giant mansion, but that's basically just setting up where the comic is gonna be. And honestly, reading these issues, and I read the next issue too to see if it was part of the same story. And it's not. It's a really disappointing story. Like the fights are super short in it. Wally doesn't use his powers in any creative ways in these stories. And at this time in his history, Wally West was a much slower character than Barry Allen. His max speed topping out at 700 miles per hour, instead of Barry, who was able to run at the speed of light. And it would have been really cool and one of the cool things about this Flash series is getting to see him grow and change. But honestly, from what I've heard, this first era of Flash, of the 80s Flash comic, written by Mike Baron, is just the worst run of the series. And you can see that by looking at compiled lists of the best Flash stories. No, there are stories from this series, but it's not any of the ones written by Mike Baron. Mike Baron's writing is not very good throughout these two issues, and Jackson Geiss's artwork is also not that good. And I even liked some of Jackson Geiss's artwork. Like some of his covers are decent, and he drew X Factor for Marvel, and I thought his artwork was better on that. But when you have a mediocre writer compared with a mediocre artist, you're going to end up with a mediocre comic. And one of the things that really kind of hurts this comic is Wally West just doesn't feel right. You know what I mean? Like Wally's kind of supposed to be this like nice, like, you know, kind of like, you know, a little bit of a ladies' man, like kind of like the Human Torch, where he's a little bit of, you know, ladies' man. He's very confident, but he still has a good heart, like very close to the surface. He's, you know, he makes light of situations. He treats those around him with grace. And if you want to see like perfect Wally West, watch Justice League Unlimited. You get the perfect iteration of the Flash character from that show, and from Justice League also. But making Wally like ask for, you know, Wally ask the doctors to give him health care to run the heart. Like, it just doesn't work. And there's a lot of dialogue in this comic that feels really stiff in a way that Wally West never felt to me before. And I've read other issues of this series from later on down the road. I've read some of the issues by Mark Waid. Those are really good. Even some of the ones by William Messner Loebs are pretty good. But these ones written by Mike Baron, they've got a stiffness to them that really doesn't work well with the Flash comic. And it's hard. I've actually met Mike Baron a couple of times at various conventions. He's also just not a very nice dude. He's kind of just, very, oh yeah, no, I'm a great writer, like stuff like that. Like, he's not a very friendly person, and he's not very, open, he's just not very interesting to talk to, which is odd, because I've met other writers and artists at conventions who are great, even ones that I've never actually really heard of much at all, like people whose work I didn't previously know, like Michael Golden was one that I met who was really cool. But anyway, that's kind of a side track from the point of this from what I'm talking about. But yeah, in all reality, these first couple issues, again, these were the first Wally West as Flash stories. And man, they're just not very good. And Wally doesn't feel like the same character that he was in the Teen Titans comic a few months earlier, or in DC's Legends, like what I've got back here. I've got a video about Legends, by the way, on my YouTube channel. You should check that out. It's a pretty good one. But Wally feels completely different in this Flash #1 than he did in those issues of Legends, and in jail. And obviously, some of this stuff I'm referencing is from later on in the character's history. But he feels completely different to how he felt in Teen Titans, which was before this. Like, he just feels like such a different character in these comics that it's hard to justify in my mind. And it took a while for Flash's character to recover from the Mike Baron era of Flash. Flash stopped being as popular until Mark Waid took him over and really woke the character up, made him really cool, made him faster, made him cooler, made him more loyal to people in his life. Like, Mark Waid did a lot of really cool things for Flash. And it's just hard to, so this series I do recommend, but these first couple issues, I just can't say that I do. And one more note on the first half of this story was later adapted into an episode of the Young Justice TV show. That's obviously the part of the story where Wally is given the assignment to run a human heart from across the country, basically, because nobody else could do it in time. So Wally, and in that episode of Young Justice, what makes it work is Wally doesn't want to do it because all the rest of the team is going on this big mission, working with the Justice League, and that's what he wants to be doing. But Wally's running with the heart, and eventually he realizes, once he gets to the hospital, he realizes in the episode that it's for a little girl. And it's this good character moment for Wally where he's realizing that, it's not just the small missions that matter, it's not just the big ones that matter, it's the small ones too. And it's a really good episode of that show. I would highly recommend it. It's in that first season. Very good episode. But I can't really recommend the comic that it was adapted from, because it just doesn't, having it be an older woman who's just an author just doesn't make it as interesting. And Vandal Savage's characterization in this story is really weird too. I want to talk about that, actually. Because Vandal Savage as this, like, you know, kind of like hulking, imposing magician, that's really weird. That's not what Vandal Savage typically is. Vandal Savage is like this ancient despot, basically. Like, he's this, like, ancient warlord who's, like, trying to conquer kingdoms. And that's what Vandal Savage is. He's not this magician who, like, just has beef with the Flash, who's trying to keep who's necessarily always trying to keep a low profile. No, he's this, like, he's an ancient businessman, basically, like an ancient tyrant. And that's a much more interesting take on Vandal Savage, and it works a lot better. Because in this story, I never felt that Vandal Savage posed a threat to Flash, but it felt like I should have been thinking that. Like, I felt like I should have been thinking Wally was in danger, but I never did. And part of that is the action sequences in these issues are really short. And they're really short, and they both ended the same way, with Wally literally just throwing Savage out of the place they were. And it's just not a very interesting comic, honestly. But yeah, there are really good stories in this Flash comic, though. So I'm disappointed that to start it off, it kind of swung. It didn't. Basically, this first issue of the Flash comic struck out looking. Like, they didn't swing for the fences. They didn't swing at all. They just struck out looking. They didn't try anything. Like, everything new they tried failed, and they failed. And part of the reason it failed is because they didn't go for anything hard enough. Wally feels incredibly flat and two-dimensional in this story. And again, that's something that changes later. Like Wally gets really fleshed out, and before this, he was a really fleshed out character. So it feels like Mike Baron just missed the essence of who Wally West was for these stories. And Jackson Geiss's art just doesn't back up the writing very well. And the art's not good enough to justify the bad writing. So those are kind of my thoughts on this first Flash story. But I'd be really interested to hear what you guys have to think. So just let me know what you thought of these stories. I think that could be fun. But yeah, like I said, can't say that I would necessarily recommend. But I would recommend this series as a whole. But yeah, I think that's really all I've got for today. So I'm just another guy named James. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.